Invited Martin Seager. Seager, I'm pronouncing that right, aren't I?
Yes, that's right.
There we go. We were on a panel with Dr. Susie Bennett last year sometime, and I just love what you were saying, if I'm honest with you. And obviously, I've had a bit of a Google of your name, and it's like, this is a bloke who really gets men's lives. And I don't want to turn it into like an us and them because I don't think that really helps. But you seem to be listening to men a lot more than a lot of. You're a clinical psychologist, aren't you?
Yes, yeah, and a psychotherapist, yeah.
Yeah. So just give us a bit of a rundown. Just give a bit of a rundown of who you are, because you're a lot more educated and clever than I am.
Well, I mean, I was in the health service for 30 years as a clinical psychologist, in the charity sector for another 10 years, working with addictions, suicide, Samaritans, homelessness, and I've been working a bit more independently since then. But I still do the odd bit of largely free or low fee work with people. But I'm mainly trying to work. I've been a specialist on men's mental health, men's issues now for about at least 15 years. And I had a light bulb moment myself. I wasn't even thinking about men's issues in the health service very much till I was in my 40s. So I have to admit my mistakes that I overlooked men's issues myself till I was in my 40s. Uh, but really, yeah. So I've been around a long time. I'm in my 60s now. But yeah, since I started working on men's issues, I've never looked back though. I've been very keen to promote them within psychology and in mental health and chip away and connect with people like yourself who are trying to help guys, help everybody. Because if you don't help men, if men aren't helped, then the whole of society is going to go down the pan because society depends on men.
Yeah, no, no, without question. So I'm just going to come out of it then. What do you? I know what I think men's issues are, but in through your experience and love, what do you think the issues are with men?
Well, I think the key issue at the moment is the loss of respect for masculinity. So that men have always had a kind of bargain with society that they will protect. In peace and wartime, men have done all the dangerous stuff. So basically, in wartime, they go and die for the freedom of people, literally. And in peacetime, they will go up all the dangerous buildings and do all the dangerous jobs and die. Over 90% of people who die at work are men. And they've always taken that deal on the basis that they were respected. But what's happened in the last, I suppose, 50 years, and certainly more in the last 20, 30 years, is that men are still expected to do all that stuff, but they're no longer respected. And we now even talk about men as toxic, toxic masculinity is now a phrase that everyone's using, which is quite a bigoted, prejudicial phrase. It's not based on any science, but it's caught the media narrative because the narrative has become disrespectful of masculinity. So men are still now doing all the protection of society, but they've got the image of being toxic. And that is bad for men's mental health. I mean, we're going into schools now and teaching boys that they need to respect girls as if girls were any more respectful than boys.
Yeah.
Human beings are no more respectful than other human beings, regardless of gender, whatever. Human beings are the bad people are not bad because of their gender. They're bad for all sorts of reasons. And to label a gender toxic. So I think that's the biggest issue, that we've got a negative image of masculinity now. The other big issue for men is fatherhood, that men don't get access to children in the courts of law they're not seen as uh, equally important as mothers, as parents, which is not very kind to all the lovely dads and the fathering that goes on. And the evidence is very clear that kids without dads, girls and boys, don't do as well in life. So fathering is a big issue. Homelessness, 85% of the people on our streets
Yeah.
who are rough sleepers are men. We allow men, we're more likely to leave a man on the street than a woman. We're more protective towards women. So it's the same issue. We don't protect men as much, so they're more likely to end up on the streets. Prison sentencing, we give men longer sentences for the same crimes. We see them as more dangerous than, we regard men in a more negative way. So we give them, even though it's the same crime, they get longer sentences. There's less justifications for their actions. A man who does a bad thing, we don't go into his abuse history. Most of the most violent men are who are abusive have been abused themselves as kids, but we don't, not that that justifies it, but we don't even try to explain a violent man. But if a woman's violent, we think, well, why is that? You know, she's had a bad childhood. So we're more compassionate
Yeah.
towards women, and that's called the empathy gap. Myself and John Barry came up with the theory of gamma bias, which just explains all these different biases towards men in a systematic way. So when a man does a good thing, we don't say it's positive. Like a fire, we don't call firemen anymore because there's a few women. We say firefighters, but there's way more women who commit sexual assaults than there are firefighters. But when women commit sexual assaults, we don't include them in the statistics. So we talk about sexual assault as a male issue, and we talk about firefighting as gender neutral, even though it's 95% men. So these biases mean that we, as a society, we've gradually got toxic attitudes to men, and this means men generally, it erodes your sense of self-worth. It's not good for the mental health of boys who are getting this message all the time. That's why they end up with bad influences like Andrew Tate, who I am no great fan of. But if boys are getting bad messages all the time about who they are, they're going to turn to anything that's sort of positive about masculinity. So there are so many issues for men, and it's really incredible the blindness that society has to men. In my own profession of psychology, we've only got less than 20% men in psychology now. And there's absolutely no training in male psychology. There's only one module in the world. Psychology, there's only one university in the world that teaches male psychology. That's Sunderland in the UK, which was based on some of the work myself and John Barry did, some of their original inspiration to set up that module. That's the only module. So that tells you all you need to know about prejudice against men, that there's only one university in the world that's even interested in studying male psychology.
Well, the thing is, you said a few things on there, and I don't want to bounce around it, so I apologise. But it's just
Right.
when the whole toxic masculinity stuff that started creeping up short about a year or 2 years after, because we've only been running as a charity for 4th of March 2019 after Keith died.
Yeah.
And about a year or 2 years later, that's when everyone was like toxic masculinity. So I started looking at stuff, going, okay, well let's look at questions of like what is toxic masculinity. And back then, for 30 days, for about a year straight, this was like at least let's say 2 years ago, in Google alone, there's 4,500 people a month searching for what is toxic masculinity. If you do that search in a worldwide search, it's literally in the thousands and thousands every 30 days. So then we took the attitude to go, do you know, we're not going to talk about it as a charity. I'm not going to get involved in talks. I'm not going to be going to schools to try and get your young boys to stop following Andrew Tate.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, if so many people a month don't actually know what toxic masculinity is using Google's data, why on earth, what gives people the right to say that me as a bloke who's the typical bloke, I love wild camping, I love engines, my wife calls me a giant man child. And I'm okay with that. I'm just a bloke,
That's true, because also women, when you get married or you just have if you're a male-female partnership, the female is also a child in some ways. The female is also protected by the man from dangerous stuff. The man takes over as the father figure. So, you know, it's quite common that women will have a motherly quality to their male partners, and it works both ways. So, you know, but people always emphasize the man is the more childish one. It just depends on the situation. But yeah, we are all children as well. All adults have a child part of ourselves, and that's great. That gives us our curiosity and our love for life. I love to play. I love to explore and be curious. That comes from childhood.
Yeah, and I think we need to be embracing that.
Yeah,
with both genders, if I'm honest with you. But I think it goes back to what I was trying to say, probably in a bad way. So I apologise. Is if so many people are willing to call me toxic masculinity just because I'm a bloke, then if my depression kicks in, I'm high functioning depression, I'm high functioning BPD as well. I think I've grown out the BPD. I think the therapy and stuff like that has worked wonders for me. But I think where I'm going with this one is like if you see me struggling, like, oh, talk to me. But I know that you're sharing stuff about all men are toxic, blah, 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 what's the point?
Exactly. That's definitely. And talking can help people. That's why
Yeah,
we're asking men to talk. If even if we're sincere about that and saying, "Come on, guys, talking's good for you," then talking can also be harmful
yeah,
because talking is very powerful, and a lot of the messages that men hear when they do talk are negative. So it's better not to talk unless you talk in the right way. And as you implied earlier, it's not about men talking; it's about people listening to men.
yeah,
No point talking if people don't listen to you, and that's one of the approaches I've definitely developed with my colleagues over the years is that it's not about getting men to talk; it's about getting people to listen to men.
yeah,
Uh, we did that with the Samaritans. We did a year-long project in 2014. We just exposed the volunteers. 80% of Samaritans volunteers are women. But we exposed for a year. We did a load of presentations to them. We had blues music. We had Shakespeare Company come and do a small play for us with all the women playing the men's parts. We did all kinds of stuff for a year. Then we measured the length of phone calls with men before and after we did that. And we increased the length of time men spent on the phone with Samaritans volunteers. We doubled the length of time men spent on the phone simply by changing the volunteers' way of listening, by exposing them to all the men's issues that not directly because of blues music. Basically, we had a workshop on blues music and just saying to the volunteers, you think men don't express their feelings? Well, what is blues music then? It's kind of
yeah,
most of our culture, pop culture, blues culture, rock, it's all men's feelings. It's
yeah,
all there to be heard. We just don't listen to men. We don't think about it as men's emotions. So it's not about men. Men don't need, and also talking isn't the only way to help. You were just talking about walking groups, camping. There's all kinds of ways you can feel better about yourself. You don't have to talk. The
yeah,
most important thing you need to do psychologically is connect. It's not talk, it's connect. So talking can be a brilliant way of connecting, but so can walking, sport, camping, doing stuff with people, sharing stuff. It doesn't have to be actual talking. This is where the therapy model's gone a bit wrong, because sitting in a room just talking about yourself is less appealing on average to men than women. It's not appealing to every woman.
yeah,
If you get a guy and you walk with them or you go somewhere and side by side and do stuff, men will talk in a different way and it helps them. But equally, it's not the talking that makes you better. It's doing something you like, something that means something. It's being heard by other people, belonging to something.
That's
People
purpose,
with
isn't it?
human needs. Yeah, purpose.
But purpose is something. Well, I've done hundreds and hundreds. I think it's over 1,000 of these, but they're all on the internet. And the one thing what I have seen is actually most of the time, a lot of it is when I do videos like this, especially if they've had a bit of a life issue, the pattern I see is day one's problems turn into day three, day four, day five, and then the full blown crazy is getting. We've said that many times, and we have a laugh about it. Now, not at the time, obviously. This when we're doing this, but we're not too PC about how we talk because we are talking to men. We're trying to educate. So you see that bit where all the small problems bottle up, and then I start questioning, and go, well, why couldn't they talk to somebody during the small problems? Well, nobody will listen. So that's there we go. And then the other thing what I see time and time again is just their sense of purpose. It's just completely and utterly gone. So I just think we need to be encouraging that. Just
Absolutely. Myself and colleagues about 20, nearly 20 years ago now, about 18, 19 years ago, we did something for the Labour government at the time, which was Tony Blair's government. We had Patricia Hewitt as Health Secretary. I was still in the health service then. We set up a group to advise her on what are the needs, the basic 5 needs of the human condition psychologically. So if we keep treating people as having mental illnesses and mental conditions, that's not the best way of looking at it. If you look at it as people have 5 really core mental health needs and you try to meet those needs, you'll help people a lot better. So those 5 needs are to be loved. That doesn't mean sort of intimacy necessarily, it just means being cared about. So everyone, if there isn't someone in your life who cares about you, who's showing that to you, your mental health is going to go downwards. Then the second one is to be heard. if there isn't someone in the world who's hearing your voice, even if they don't agree, at least they're listening to you, and you're not being heard, then your mental health's going to go down. Third one is belonging. If you don't belong to a family, friendship group, a work group, some kind of body of people where you feel you're a member of that tribe or that group, your mental health's going to go down. The fourth of five is to make a difference. If you're not making a difference to the world, even in a small way, to like your children, your friends, your partner, your work colleague, if you're not making a difference when you get up in the morning, your mental health's going to go down. And finally, it's a sense of purpose. If you don't wake up in the morning with a sense of purpose, of some kind of direction, some kind of meaning to what you want to do with your life, your mental health's going to go down. So I think of it not so much as treating mental health conditions
I
as
agree.
meeting those needs.
Yeah,
So a lot of the things you're doing are successful because you're meeting people's needs.
yeah. Well, I have thought long and hard about why has MANUP turned successful, and I'm proud of it. I'm still disgusted with the only mental health charity funding research and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
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 I am proud of that, but yeah, again, I am absolutely disgusted about it as well because it
yeah.
seems
It's both. Yeah,
yeah. But I think it's because maybe it's because as a men's mental health charity, bear in mind we fund Susie the mouse. We don't talk about suicide that much.
mm,
The reason we do it is because we try to change minds early. And I know for a fact, so I keep looking, I've got a board up there. And every now and again, a couple of times a month, we get small checks from funeral homes.
yeah.
And it's a whip round at the the dad's son, whatever,
Mm,
funeral. And it's horrible. But where I was going with that one, but when I speak to them and when I've looked at research and all of this kind of stuff, I'm pretty adamant that in most cases, when a bloke decides to call it a day, it's really hard to get them out of it.
yeah.
We're not qualified for that. So our attitude is try and get rid of it all, get rid of all the small problems, educate, get rid of the small problems.
It's a good philosophy. But even when people are suicidal, it's always those five things. If you're low on all those five things, your risk for suicide is higher. So if you don't feel loved, you don't feel heard, you don't feel you belong, you don't feel you can make a difference, you don't feel you've got a purpose, we'll all become suicidal. Everyone's capable of feeling suicidal if those five needs aren't met, if all five of them aren't met. Because suicide is ultimately like, well, this is just so, life has become so uncontrollably painful or oppressive that the only escape, people normally take their own lives for two reasons. One is kind of a sense of, it's mainly a sense of escape
Yeah,
from it's the ultimate, look, I'm taking control. It's sort of escape and control. I can't stop what's happening. I've no one's listening, nothing's happening. I can't do anything about this. So it's a sense of I'll take control by doing this. And there's an element of wanting other people to notice. If you take your life, you kind of imagine people are going to be impacted, and of course they are. But obviously, the sad thing is you're not around to see that. But the reason you're doing it is to escape pain. There's no other escape. Sometimes it's a sort of self-punishment because if people hate themselves enough, they think, well, the world's better off without me. I'll just get rid of myself. But quite often it's both of those things. But at the end of the day, you can prevent it if and no one has to be suicidal if their needs are met. And anyone could become suicidal if their needs are taken away. If I lost everything that meant anything to me tomorrow, like my whole world was shattered by the deaths of all my loved ones, or a tragedy, or my life fell apart because of external circumstances, which happens to people in all the time in war-torn places or places where they've had massacres or war, or then obviously sometimes fighting a war gives you a purpose. But if you lose everything, see, it's the question of what it means to your mind. And
yeah,
some people in bad situations, it gives them a purpose to fight. Like in you think, right, I'm going to do something about the situation with men. I'm going to do, it gives you a purpose. So in a way, it's kind of given you more energy for life. But people are all different, and but we're all the same in those needs. How we meet them is different, but basically anyone could become suicidal and everyone who is suicidal, nearly everybody, that can be prevented if enough is done. But obviously, there are some people like on terminally ill and no hope. You could understand why they want to end their life just as a kind of take control of that and have some dignity. There's all of these issues. But the other thing is that people, you know, men are more likely to take that route because they are partly there is men are problem solvers and fixers. So
Yeah,
kind of, in a way, the suicide is like the ultimate solution for some guys. It's like the ultimate control, the ultimate fix. So because the male psychology works a little bit more in that way, and because people care less about men, you put those two things together. The male suicide rate in every country has always been higher. It's not just a cult, this is something about the male mentality in our species. Every single culture, bar maybe one in China, it's rural China or something, every single culture, men are always much more likely to take their own lives than women.
I don't think that statistics changed since, what was it, 1868?
Yeah, it might have
It hasn't
evolved, but
changed.
it's always basically the same, yeah.
Yeah, and the only thing what's gone up is the numbers.
Yeah,
I think you touched base on that. I think you said, I don't want to misquote you. So, I'm a massive fan of actually, like with me, if we knew each other better and you're like, Dan, you're all right. If you were like, I think you're struggling with your mental health, I would freak out and probably ignore you. But if you were just like, Dan, do you want a coffee? Do you want a pint of walk?
yeah, absolutely.
Or even my chair trustee, I've said this so many times actually, but my chair trustee, we go back years. He
Mm.
knows, he knows when me the anxiety, when I'm taking on too much, he knows my triggers.
Yeah,
I hate that word. But now because we've got such a good relationship, he'll be like, he'll call me up or meet up or whatever else, and he'll be like, Dan, man, I'm not being funny, but you're being a prick. And I'm not suggesting everybody goes around saying that, but because
yeah,
he
but that works for you, yeah.
no, absolutely. Even not my wife. She's just like, Dan, you're doing me head in. Maybe you just need to go away for go wild camping, go and live on go and live on a mountain for a couple of days and come back and sort your head out. And there's no talk about the mental health. And like that tick, it frustrates me, the whole tick list of makes you cry, blah, 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 blah. It's
So
like,
that's actually almost it's wrong in two counts. Firstly, because it's trying to be prescriptive and tell you what to do.
yeah,
Never works for anybody to say tell them what to do. But then secondly, for men, it's the opposite. If you draw in men's attention to their mental health, you make them feel worse. You make them feel more ashamed, more defensive, more reactive. What you need to do is just get in alongside guys and respect them and just kind of meet their needs, like be a
yeah,
friend, do something with them. You don't have to talk about their mental health. Mental health is improves if you do stuff that meets your needs. You don't have to talk about it. Doesn't mean you have to avoid it either. It's just that for some people, it's not necessary. And that's why myself and John Barry, we come up with sort of this idea of male-friendly approaches. Most therapies are not male-friendly.
absolutely. Yeah,
Sit down in a room and talk, that's going to put a lot of people off. And it's not because there's something wrong with them. It's that therapy isn't designed, we should be tailoring our interventions to suit men, not trying to change men to suit our interventions.
yeah.
And our interventions are very female friendly in the sense counselling is mainly a female model.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's funny you say it because every 2 weeks we offer. I use the term therapy. They are group therapy sessions. We used to word it like that with James Elliott as a psychotherapist. He does all the Harvest. He's a good egg. He really is.
Mm.
And they started to build up, but we wouldn't really get many people talking in like the text chat. And then James would do like a presentation of just like what rather than how to deal with anxiety, depression, anger, we would say why do you get it and use data, science, and all else. And then the word started getting around, and people just like, oh, this is. It was like men wanted to learn why they have it rather than how to deal with it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And funny enough, this quarter we've been doing it for a year. We've signed up for another year, which I'm proud. Again, I'm proud we do that every 2 weeks. Is we've actually removed the term therapy to group sessions.
Yeah. Why not?
It's doubled, literally doubled
Yeah.
the sign. Obviously, it's all free. Whatever, we never charge it. So it's just changing our terminology to match the people we want to try and help, or the men we want to try and help. It's
Yeah.
even the chat, like they're all talking about open stuff, but I think it goes back to. So I'm bouncing everywhere, so I apologise. I've said a
Huh?
few times, I strongly believe even women or anyone could start a men's only group down a bowl. It doesn't matter what it is. Any stupid idea, a ferret walking group, doesn't matter what it is. And I absolutely guarantee, even if they just did a post on their social Facebook, they will get 5 men turn up.
Yeah.
Without, and that does make me question. Like, well, hold on a minute. If anybody on the planet could start a men's only group and they would get 5 blokes turn up, it's the people in their life need to change the way they talk to that man then, because
Yes.
he is willing to talk because he's going to a men's only
Yes.
group.
And the Samaritans, as just to go back to them, we were trying to change their training because they were trained to get men to talk in a certain way. And they
Yeah,
said, no, just listen to them. Because the Samaritans is originally based just on listening anyway, and just ordinary people listening to other people and not pretending they're mini therapists or something. But
yeah,
Samaritans now, like a lot of charities, see themselves as mental health experts, which they're not. They really should just be focusing on listening to people as fellow people. But so that you'd have this problem where a man would start talking about his football club, and the female volunteer, who's 80% the female, might feel, oh, I've got to get him talking about his feelings. And then, of course, that makes the conversation dry up, or he doesn't feel listened to. She feels he's not really facing his feelings, so it doesn't go anywhere. But actually, if a guy starts talking about football, trying to make a connection with you, and he
hmm,
just wants you to hear him. And B, football might actually be quite important. It's this idea of trivializing men's lives that actually football, for a lot of guys and quite a lot of women, it's quite a huge part of what they love and it's their passion and their connection to life.
it's
So,
purpose, isn't it?
yeah, so we patronize men by sort of making them think, oh, they're all a bit emotional. You even see this phrase, emotionally illiterate. I've seen that phrase used many times of men, which is disgusting. And men are just differently illiterate. Their
Yeah,
emotions are just as real. And if you're in a danger situation, it's much more on average good to have a male emotional pattern than a female one, because males will focus on a task, like in wartime or in danger situations in peace. A man is better at focusing on getting their feelings out of it and just focusing on the task and the mission. Men
yeah.
are great at doing that, and that is an evolved warrior. Uh, Men have been hunters and warriors, and they're very good at focusing on a target. But now what we're doing is stigmatizing male emotion. But if you're a female athlete, you've got to learn to think more like a male. If you're a female footballer, you've got to learn to push all the feelings away and just focus on putting the ball in the corner and just think. That is a male skill. So what we've tended to do is stigmatize male emotions and sort of privilege the idea of emotional opening up. But that is some situations you don't want that. You want emotional opening up in the right situations, not in the wrong ones. And men, if you want to help guys, opening up emotionally isn't the best way on average to do it. What you need to do is open up to those guys. Like young boys in a boxing club will get way more out of it than if you sit them in a therapy room, because A, they've got a father figure running the boxing club. They feel like they're part of a family. They're getting self-esteem because suddenly they're worth something. They're being encouraged to do well in boxing. They're starting to have some purpose. You see, a boxing club would meet all those needs for a young guy who was feeling a bit worthless. Much better than sitting there in a therapy room saying, tell me your feelings. You don't need to tell the feelings, you just need to do the things that will make you feel better.
I agree with you, and I think you touched on something else actually, because I've been asked a few times when I've been vocal about the whole cry, cry, cry stuff, and it really does annoy me. And I'm like, but I've been accused of being anti-crying, and I'm not anti-crying at all. I've been told it's really good, but
When it's spontaneous, yeah.
yeah, no, absolutely. But I still can't find any science what says it fixes anything. It can relieve, you know, all this, and it can relieve,
Sure.
but it doesn't fix anything. It can relieve some things. But anyway, but I'm quite headstrong on it, and I've bitten through it 2 times because I'm not anti at all. but I was raised in the care system, so I knew from a very, very young age, actually crying doesn't work. They're still going to move you to a different foster home or a different care home. And that cop is still going to ignore you, and that cop will still probably give you a bit of a kick in for back chatting him and whatever else.
Yeah.
So it just didn't work. So I don't know whether maybe I was born like that or I've just learned throughout life that crying just doesn't work.
No, and it
For
doesn't.
me.
It doesn't work necessarily. It's, as you said earlier, it's not. You don't want to be anti-crime, but equally you don't want to be pro-crime.
Yeah,
Crying is just in the right situation. It's just a natural reaction. But in your case, it's quite clear why it wouldn't. Certainly wouldn't work because you've been brought up in a situation where you're not safe to cry,
yeah.
and if you're cried, you're not going to be responded to in the way that would be encouraging you to process that emotion in that way. But you
Yeah.
can process your emotions in other ways.
Yeah, exactly. Like the radio or even the wild camping, the walk,
Yeah,
or sometimes my wife is bloody brilliant at it. She'll just sit there and she's got ADHD, so I think she's really good at just switching on. She'll just let me moan and slag off whoever I want. Moan, 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 moan. I know damn well she's probably not listening. She's probably even pretending to listen. She's got really good at it. And then she'll be like, feel better? She'll go to the pub. It
that's great.
but I think, and that's what frustrates me. Is like everyone's like, men should cry. I'm like, well, if you want a bloke just to open up to you, like work out a different way to get to the solution. It doesn't need to be cry, cry, cry.
And also saying men should cry is just blaming men again.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Why should they cry? Uh, basically, and especially if no one's listening. If you're a male victim of domestic violence and you cry, no one's going to provide you with a refuge.
No, exactly. It's absolutely terrible. I've had a bit of a spat with our local council in Ipswich because they've got these things of don't take photo, all these silhouettes, don't take photos, and all this domestic violence abuse stats. And me being me, because I'm like that, I've googled all of them, and they're just generic stats with everything pigeonholed together. Not one of them is gender, but the silhouette is men.
Mm.
So I'm like, why does that need to, why do you need the silhouette of man on there? Because that's statistic. And I've had a clash with our local police force as well, because they shared something, an abuse hotline as a local charity. They deal with domestic abuse. And they're extremely vocal. We do not care whether you're a man or woman, we will help you. But even our own police are like chucking all of these statistics in there about anti-men, anti-men. I'm like, this is a charity which is doing really, really good stuff for men and women. And you're making it a gender thing. And this is our police force.
Yeah, it's very bad. I had clients in the NHS, male victims of domestic abuse. If the neighbours reported the disturbance, the police would just come and take the guy away, even
Yeah.
though the guy was the victim. They just wouldn't ask questions. They assumed the guy was the perpetrator and take him away, even though the woman had been throwing objects at him, drawing blood.
Yeah.
The man was still seen as the perpetrator. So these attitudes are need challenging. There is gradual progress, I guess, in recognizing it. But yeah, people like you are vital to stand up to this, and we have to chip away at it.
So there's just one thing, just before I'm just looking at the time, actually, we're
Yeah.
floating this. We could keep going
Yeah.
for hours. I think one thing I just want to, not that I need to, not that you need verification, but you did say something earlier, and I just want to cover this.
Yeah.
You said about homeless and whatever, and I used to run a soup kitchen, so every single weekend, I'll never do it again. I did it for 5 years and just fell out of love with it. You know, when you've been there, done it, you don't need to do it
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
Every single week, feeding 20 to 100, and as you probably know, most of them were men, if not all of them men.
Yeah.
And I can absolutely guarantee we had hotlines to like crisis teams with the NHS and the welfare, blah, blah, blah. If a new woman come along, we would have to ring them up straight away, and they would literally come in a van and scoop them up and put them in a B&B.
Yeah.
If a man come along, probably on drugs or whatever else, self-harming, same age, literally the only thing different is the gender, the sex. They'll just be left there. Women just cart it off and help straight.
Absolutely, that's correct. That is what we call gamma bias.
I've been there. I've seen it happen with my
No,
yeah.
me too. And it's once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
But society as a whole isn't seeing it. people like yourself, me, and a lot of your guys that you talk to and listen to you are seeing it. Increasingly, there are people seeing it, but it's still not. It's not the mainstream. You know, people are still because even in evolutionary terms, we've been wired to protect women and children, and then in a post-feminist culture, women's issues have been in the women's rights, women's needs have been prioritized because of that, and in some cases correctly. So therefore, men's issues just get pushed to the background, and if you start talking about them, people ridicule you or attack you, as we've said. So, but yes, a man on the streets is more likely to be left on the streets because we're more protective towards women, including men. As men, we see all human beings see a woman or a child, they're going to protect them. I mean, the Titanic, 80% of the women survived the Titanic.
Wow. Yeah.
And 80% of the men died.
Yeah. There you go, probably, but anyway, that's the
They were all putting the women and children in the boats.
No, exactly. It's crazy, isn't it? So just before we draw to a close, then, do you, in your professional world and stuff, do you think it is changing? Because with me, I think some bits are changing, as in people are listening more. Men are certainly talking more, but I think sadly it's because they're talking to each other more.
I think there's some change in that the hostility is less confident. You know what I mean? When I talk now about men's issues, the comeback I get, the hostility is less confident. People are a bit less sure that they're right when they argue with you now.
Yeah.
So it's like we're getting there, but it's still, you can still get away with prejudice against men. But when someone's really articulate about it, people give up a bit quicker fighting you over it. This is at an individual level. Organizationally and systemically, we've still got a long way to go, obviously, because we've got things like a Women Inequalities Committee rather than just an Equalities Committee. We've got a policy for violence against women and girls, which men are only included as a subsection of that. So, we've got a society where our policies are protective of women and children. We don't see men as needing protecting. We see men as needing to do the protecting. And if there's a bad guy, we see that as a sign that all men are bad. So we've still got that, but I think it is changing, but it's changing very slowly.
Yeah.
So
I think I agree. I think I agree with that. It just feels like for every 10 people you can, I don't. For every 10 people, like you see the change they talk, because they say once you see the bias, you cannot unsee it. Absolutely, you just can't unsee it, and it drives my wife fucking nuts. Absolutely, like every gift card or anything like that. But I think it is changed. But as I say, for every 10 people you see like change the way they talk, so it's a bit more fairer. It's like 50 other people come out the woodwork. But just this is why we're not scared to join communities and have videos like this, because hopefully there'll be bits of people in your world that will watch this what might.
Absolutely. It all helps. This is the way attitudes do change and things do change. People chip away at it, they don't give up, they support each other, they keep believing in it, and gradually over time it does make a difference. But it's a long old journey. But it is slowly changing, not as fast as we'd like. But maybe now in America, with the good, the very positive stuff coming out of the vice president was talking some very positive stuff about young men, saying, you're not second-class citizens, we believe in you. So maybe that the American shift in culture towards a more male-friendly language might help Britain and other Western countries become a bit less anti-male in their attitudes, we hope.
Totally. But on that bombshell, I think that's that good moment.
Yeah.
So let me just hit the unrecord button. There you go.